Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, and also on TikTok. Folks, for the first half hour, we will be on TikTok. And then at 7:30, we have our guest, Damien Davies, coming on. And Damien is a friend of the show. He's been here on a regular basis recently, at least once a month, we're glad to say. And he has his own YouTube channel, which is very successful. It's called CheshireCatMusings. And Damien is going to come on and speak to us. He was at the rally on Saturday, the big one in London. He's going to tell us all about that, which I'm looking forward to hearing. And also speaking about reforms chances in Wales, and also speaking about how we combat the NGOs, which are really, really one of the major powers in the United Kingdom at the moment. And I'm going to be talking about them as well in the first half hour. Now, another nice flag behind me. This is the second Battle of Britain flag that we have had up. We had one up last week, and we've got the second one up, which was donated to the organisation by a great supporter. And Battle of Britain Day was on Monday, so we're still quite close to that period of time. So it's still appropriate to have this lovely flag up there, which says 85th anniversary of the Battle of Britain on the 15th of September, 1940 to today in 2025. And a couple of aircraft there. Who can name what kind of aircraft that one is? Tell us in the comments. And that one looks pretty similar as well, doesn't it? I think they're both the same aircraft. What kind are they? Good stuff. Okay, let's say hello to some people. Debbie says, good evening, everyone. Really enjoyed the state ceremony today. That was the Donald Trump arriving. Who else watched that? Nobody does it better than us Brits when it comes to things like standing on ceremony and pageantry. That's absolutely true. Derek seems perhaps to have watched it. He says, great to see President Trump having a ball with the royal family. Plus, getting to see 10 minutes before I go back from break as usual, have to see the full edition after work, always reminds us that some people are working at this time of the day, keeping our British country moving. Well done, Derek. And well done to you. Before you go, I want you to have a wee look at these two pictures that we fired out on our Facebook of the flags. These flags in the wild. These flags in the wild. Let's fire them up. There we go. There's the first one. That's the one behind me on the left there. Okay. And that's the one, the lower one there is the one that we had up last Wednesday. Okay. And so it actually says lest we forget. It says along the bottom there, lest we forget. It's a nice flag. Good. Derek says it was good to see Ash, the Preston journalist, on the show last week. It was. And Ash did a wee video review of Protect Our Country. And we'll talk about that later in the show. And we did sell a few extra copies as a result. In fact, he put it out on the 14th. And in the last 3 days, we've sold 13 copies. 13 copies of Protect Our Country. So we usually sell about one a day. So that was good going, and a big thank you to Ash for that. Folks, if you're watching on X, please do repost this stream. That really helps to get the message out to more people. It really does. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. And if you're watching on Facebook, please share, because that's how we get all this good info out there to people. Robert says, good evening. Good evening to you, Robert. And thanks for all your good work. And to Anthony. Robert says, it's a Spitfire. The one in there. As does Auslander, says Supermarine Spitfire. And hello to Stuart from Dartmouth, from Darty. Good stuff, Stuart. Hope you're well down there. Hope it's a nice day down in Darty. Good. Well, where shall we begin? Let me check my sheet here to make sure that we've covered everything. Yeah, one thing, our first speech that we gave back on the 6th of September outside Holyrood, there was several speakers. I'm working through the video footage now. We've put the first speech, which was mine, up, accompanied by a really good photograph. Let's put the photograph up. Here we go. That's a professional photographer took that photograph. That's one of Billy Knox's pictures. And that's us giving our speech. You'll find that speech now. It's on YouTube. We'll put the link up in the threads on Facebook and also on X so that you can click into that speech. It's 11 minutes and it's entitled Clear Out the Open Borders MSPs from Holyrood. And that's what we are going to do next year. We're going to clear them out. Now, who was at the march, the event in London on the 13th there on Saturday? Did any of our viewers go? If you did, what did you think of it? Now, we've got a good picture that was taken by one of our supporters, by Mark, and it's up here. It's that one. A very good one. And as one of the AFFG supporters took that. That's, I'm going to say Westminster Bridge, right? Am I right there? That lion that stands there. Quite a powerful photograph. I like that a lot. Some good imagery coming out of that as well. So if you were there, do tell us. Do tell us. It was a massive crowd. It was very big. It was very big. I'm not going to give an estimation because the estimations have ranged from the large to the massively large. I don't want to give our opinion. We didn't have anybody counting the march or observing it in order to calculate properly the sort of numbers that it was. And, you know, that's not difficult to do. So yet still nobody does it other than us, but we never went down to do it. We weren't there. If we were there, we would be giving you some sort of fairly accurate, within a 5% margin of error for the numbers. Maybe we should start that as our official job, quite frankly. But I don't want to say what, but to give you a guide, like the COP26 march, which was the biggest march that Glasgow's seen back in when was that, 22? I can't recall offhand. Or was it 21? That was 13,000, and it took 2 hours to pass. But it was, it looked massive, but it was 13,000. So we won't give our opinion on what we think the numbers were, although we certainly got our ideas on it. From what we've seen, there was one picture that appears to show the full march. Let's fire that one up. Now that's get rid of the bit along the bottom there. So that seems to be the end of it, and the beginning of it is halfway across the bridge there. So if that is indeed the full march, so certainly a lot of people. Yeah, good. Okay. Now we've got our friend Damien Davies coming on at the bottom of the hour. Look at some comments on TikTok, see if any are comprehensible. Trying to read something that's suitable to read out. Scotland forever and ever. I'll go with that one, definitely. Guys, please try harder on TikTok, okay? You can't just be throwing out insults, okay? You've got to try to engage in some way. Give me a way of engaging with you on TikTok. Don't just like insult people. Anyway, we have a much more refined class of people on X and on Facebook and on YouTube. Derek says, great t-shirt on, Alistair. Thank you. It's by a fashion designer called David Watts. I don't think they're going anymore, but they had some nice tees. That's for sure. Got this about 5-6 years ago. Still fits me. Hello to Derek from Armadale. Let's segue into. We're going to be speaking to Derek about reform's chances in Wales, and I want to segue into talking about them. And I read this article. As you know, I read the National every day so that you don't have to. And this fellow goes, we must accept the old world is dying and be ready for a fight. And he's got a picture there that's similar to the one I just showed you from the rally on Saturday in London. And this guy, Jonathan Shaffi, I guess him and I won't really agree on that very much, really. However, I always read what he's got to say. And he seems to fear, from his point of view, that things are almost unable to be changed. What we are living through now is not a crisis of the Labour government or a temporary populist disruption in the form of Donald Trump. The issues are structurally embedded and systemic in nature. That's a good phrase, structurally embedded in the structure. And systemic, meaning approximately the same thing, that they're part of the system's lifeblood. And therefore changing these things is a very difficult thing to do. And in that, at least, he's right. Although I should imagine what he sees as the problems and what I see as the problems are probably quite distinct and different from each other. But he has here in this article recognized the difficulty of changing things through the present political system. And I would say that he's perhaps more of a pessimist than I am. I think that things can be changed through the present system, but it will require massive political disruption in the normal ways of doing things. He talks about consensus reality, which is the reality that most of us believe to be true. And he says it's being broken down in real time, that so many of us now, we don't share the same consensus about what is even real and what is even true. And I can see that. I can see that growing up. And I think that's, as I was growing up, things now are quite different from when we were younger, when everybody kind of watched the same 3 television channels, watched the same entertainment, generally thought the same things in a relatively homogenous society as well. Now, in our massively more complex, multiracial societies, with everybody having access to all kinds of information and making up their own minds on these sorts of information, it's very difficult to have that consensus reality among the population. And it's that consensus reality which keeps things stable and allows for gradual change. So when that consensus reality isn't held anymore by sufficiently large numbers of people, then everybody has their own view of what life should be. And that can cause political complications. I still think, though, to an extent, it is all solvable democratically. I have to think that, right? Because how else are things meant to change in the modern world? However, what he says here is that we are likely to see a real turn towards authoritarianism and away from democracy. It is now becoming obvious that no party can resolve the crisis. Well, I would maybe disagree with that, really. Parliamentary politics, he says, will limp from one ailing leader to the next, and that includes Nigel Farage. Well, I'm not so sure that's entirely correct. I don't think that's written in the stars at all. But I do think that what is needed will be a political party that does radically change the way that British government operates. And I say British government because there's really to my view, there is no saviour in going into an independent Scotland, because an independent Scotland will be governed by the same sorts of people who have made the crisis in the UK times 10. Okay, the Scottish executive, they want more immigration. The Scottish executive, they want less free speech. The Scottish executive are politically correct on every single matter. There's no salvation there. The only salvation is going to be at a British-wide level. And that could come. That could come. And one of the things that I touched on last week, and somebody sent me this cutting from the Daily Telegraph, is that reform would have a cabinet of all the talents. A fantastic idea. Because one of the problems that maintains Britain's mediocrity is that we put in charge of vital elements of our national life people have literally no experience in it, and we put them in charge of it for a few months or maybe 2 or 3 years before we shift them around into another area of expertise, another area of expertise, another area of expertise. So there's not, as I like to say, a business in the world that's run like that. So what Reform are saying is that what they're going to do with their cabinet is import the talent. As many, it says here, of half the cabinet ministers in a Reform UK government could be members of the House of Lords rather than elected MPs, as is traditional. So what they'll do there is they'll take Joe Bloggs, who knows how to run a business, and they'll make him the Chancellor. But Joe Bloggs wasn't elected. So what they do is they elevate him to the House of Lords, and then from the House of Lords, they put him in the British cabinet. And it says here, this guy, Zia Yusuf, says, we don't think at Reform that it makes sense necessarily for the Minister of Defence to also be doing constituency surgeries about the chlorine level in the local swimming pool. 100% good way of putting it. So a lot of our cabinet ministers, a lot of the people Nigel puts in his cabinet, not all of them, but a lot of them will not be MPs. Now, there's really only two objections to this. One is that they're not democratically elected. Well, we already have a system of people who are not democratically elected. We have the monarchy. We already have the House of Lords. So it's not breaking with any British tradition as such. And if the upside is that you're actually putting in somebody who knows what they're doing with the authority of the government and the Prime Minister who were democratically elected, then you've got that democratic chain of authority there. The other small objection is that under the present system, people in the House of Lords do not get quizzed by MPs. They do not get held to account by MPs because the Lords don't come in to the House of Commons chamber, and the MPs in the House of Commons chamber do not go in to the Lords. There's no mutual passage between the two of them. But that's easily solved. You just change the law and you say from now on, the people in the cabinet, whether they're House of Lords members or elected MPs, will sit in the House of Commons and will be subject to the questions of the House of Commons. So that's not a problem at all. However, we'll see how that goes. But that's a good way of like doing something disruptive, inverted commas, that can actually do good for the country. And that should really have been part of the British Constitution long ago. But some of the British elements of the British Constitution have become a little bit fossilized in that regard. And so times are changing, so the government is going to have to change. Now, you might get your Jonathan Shaffys saying that's authoritarian, but it's not really, because it still does have democratic accountability. The talents, the people who are appointed will still be democratically accountable to the government, which itself is democratically accountable to the people. So I don't see any problem there. And this lady kind of backs me up. Farage will be the first PM for 30 years with a plan for government. She says, quote, the first prong of the plan is to appoint galactic level talent to the cabinet. To ensure this, Reform is considering the unorthodox move of ensuring that the majority of its ministers would be based in the House of Lords rather than chosen from among the hundreds of new MPs they expect to see selected in the Commons. Reform's leadership suspects that part of the reason that so many ministers end up prostrating themselves before Whitehall mandarins, that's the people in the civil service, allowing them, the people in the civil service, to run their departments, is that they do not have a detailed grasp of their briefs. And to tackle this, the party aims to appoint subject matter experts as ministers. One should not underestimate the audacity of this plan, which smacks of US-style executive government. But it carries, she says, an element of risk. A cabinet has not drawn the majority of its members from the Lords since the 19th century. Reform's plan would not only defy 200 years of convention, but then she says, undermine the Commons' capacity to scrutinise the government. But as I've just said, that's not an objection at all, because you just change the law to ensure that any minister must enter the House of Commons and be subject to the scrutiny of the MPs. No problem there at all. So that's, with those sorts of changes, we can begin to move the country in the right direction. So I'm not a pessimist in the sense that some people might be when they look at it. And another thing, which no doubt we'll get into when we speak with Damien in a couple of minutes, is sorting out the power of the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, the quote-unquote charities. All of these groups they're all undemocratic. None of them were elected, but they all get money, our money, from our democratically elected government. So we have to be saying to our government, no more. We have to defund huge elements of that third sector, as they call it. The NGOs are like the third sector. I think that's what they call them. Catherine says there's a few people stirring up trouble with fighting talk, isn't there? On both sides, I think, on both sides of the equation there. And it's not a good idea, because I tell you who is the best fighters, and that is the state. They have the men and the machines and the money to crush everybody if they want. So don't be trying to think that you can get out of this in any way other than our democratic system. We Say It podcast says, good evening all. Good to see you, sir. Tommy asked, do I think proportional representation will come? I think, well, it is with us in a big sense, certainly. It's with us already at local elections. Certainly in Scotland. I'm not sure what's the state in England. Somebody can tell me about that. It's with us with our vote in the Scottish Parliament. Do I think it'll come at Westminster elections? Very possibly. I think that it's probably going to eventually. And the funny thing is, Reform were actually for, if I don't want to get this wrong, but I think quite a few people in Reform thought proportional representation was a good idea. And then they realized, crikey, we can actually win by first past the post. So they don't talk about proportional representation so much now, because they think that they're going to win through first past the post. So proportional representation would only come in some sort of situation where two or more parties realized it was in their favor, where some kind of coalition operation where they realized it was in our favor to actually get this. But that's probably the only way. Hi to Kat. Annie says, after Labour and Tories, I'm thinking that being qualified for the job is a better idea, so long as they're also accountable. Absolutely. As for NGOs, most should be gone. Many have caused division, allowing too much wokeness. Well, absolutely. Now, folks, I'm going to say goodbye to the folk on TikTok. Thanks very much for your thoughts on here. We've now got our guest coming up, which is Damien Davies. And on TikTok, you won't be able to see him. So all the best to the folk on TikTok. I'll say goodnight to you. Folks, please say hello to Damien from CheshireCatMusings. Hello there, Damien.
Good evening.
Good evening to you. Good evening to you. I don't know if you heard us talking there about NGOs and so on, but I know you made a video.
Yeah.
Got quite a few good views on that about hope, not hate. Now, just so that people know, this is basically a charity, so-called. Also, you could call it a non-governmental organization, gets a huge amount of money from the British taxpayer, and its job is to hunt down, well, I don't know if they hunt down people like you, Damien, but certainly they hunt down people like me and others, because our organization appeared in its annual report, which it calls The State of Hate, which has got a nice rhyme to it. And we appeared this year. We may have appeared last year, but we certainly made the pages of The State of Hate. And so this is a group that's not on our side whatsoever. What were you saying in your video?
Well, I have been quite surprised that we're finally getting a Tory MP actually coming out and moving on hate not hope, as I call them. They've written to the Charity Commission. This is the MP for Windsor, and they've written to the Charity Commission because they are acting in a partisan way. And to that I say, well, no shit, Sherlock, pardon the language. They are completely partisan. Now, I've made points on my channel previously. It wouldn't necessarily matter if the NGOs were evenly balanced. If you've got NGOs that are right-leaning and you've got NGOs that are left-leaning, it wouldn't necessarily be that big of a deal if it was evenly distributed. However, the NGOs that the government currently has, they are skewed towards the left, and that's to preserve, my view is to preserve the Blairite regime that was ushered in 1997, and that's what it is. So me and you talking about nativism, talking about Christianity, talking about keeping Britain resembling the Britain that we grew up in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s, according to the NGOs like Hate Not Hope, that's as far-right extremism. Whereas I think it's completely milquetoast. I think it's completely acceptable. Now, the Spectator did an article on Hope Not Hate, I think it was last week or the week before, where one of their people actually posed under a false identity with a fake passport, and they were trying to speak to a pro-nativist group, pro-natal group, which is pro-life,
Yeah.
anti-abortion. And this is who they will target. So say, for example, the state's got a view on the fact of, well, it's a woman's right to choose. It's abortion up until the day of birth is perfectly fine. That's just come in the British Parliament. Well, if you've got a contrary view to that, you're a far-right extremist.
Yeah. Just calling everybody that disagrees, basically.
Well, yeah. And here's the thing, right, with our politics in the UK, it's so skewed left that anything slightly to the right of where the polite discourse is, the state can brand as far right, even though it's not far right, all things being equal, because our Overton window, because our discourse is so far to the left. If you stick a pinky over that to the right, you're a far right extremist. That's the issue with the NGOs like Hate Not Hope. That's I would put Care for Calais in the same bracket. I would put Stand Up to Racism in the same bracket. Now, they don't just get funding from the British state, they get funding from trade unions. My trade union that I used to be with was the Communication Workers Union. I seen one of these stand-up to racism protests that was going to be a counter-protest, and I see the trade union that I was in at the time, their sticker on the front of it, basically advertising the rally, and I was like, hang on. Is my dues, is my union subs paying for this nonsense? Because I've not agreed to that. and that's when I quit my trade union. And there's also other funders, so it's not just the British state, it's not just the trade unions, it's like the National Lottery. So if you put a line on the National Lottery, you don't know how they're going to allocate the money. They say it's for worthy causes. Well, who decides what a worthy cause is? The British state decides what the worthy cause is. You'll never. Here's my view as well. Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain. They could be a very powerful NGO for the right of centre politics. So if reform, which I think they will get in at the next election, they could have actually policy designed by Restore Britain, Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe doesn't have to like Nigel Farage. He doesn't have to completely support, because they're a separate organisation now. So if you had a team of people that are working with that would redress a lot of the balance. Would you agree?
I would agree, to an extent. I think and I would support such an idea, absolutely. I think that the sorts of people who work in NGOs and such like are not like us. They're not our people, as it were. The people who enter that field are themselves very much of a type, if you know what I'm saying. Politically,
are you on about middle class? Are you on about social status? Or are you on about specifically?
I'm on about where their political views lie.
Okay.
I'm saying it's not. I don't like using these labels, but say right wing, say. That kind of person doesn't enter the NGO world, doesn't enter the third sector, rarely goes into charities. That's
what if they go out in the private sector making money for themselves, basically. That's what the right-wing capitalists would do.
Yeah, sort of like that, in the sense. So it's not like there would suddenly be a burgeoning of patriotic NGOs. But I think what you're saying is a good idea. I mean, I'd like to think that should be encouraged. But why aren't they there already? Why are all the NGOs?
Because it's against the Blairite regime. This is the thing. When the Tories got in 2010, yes, they were in a coalition with the Lib Dems. Yeah, okay, acceptable. But they could have repealed anything that Tony Blair brought in. They could have got rid of devolution. They didn't have to stick with the Supreme Court. They could have got rid of Ofcom. The Tories put through the non-crime hate incidents, and the Tories put through the Office for Budget Responsibility, which now dictates where the government, where the Chancellor can actually cut or spend. Yes. And I'm like, so any particular government policy of any substance is not decided by the front man that you see at the cabinet. It's decided by these NGOs. They're at arm's reach. They're not elected. They're deciding government policy, and they're not accountable.
Yeah, that's true. And you talked there about the Blairite regime. Well, it's just reminded me, and I'm just looking it up here on Wikipedia, but there was a group, I don't know if they're still around, you don't hear so much about them, called Unite Against Fascism. And that was formed in 2003. And one of the founding signatures, and it was like a street group gang in some ways, Yeah. And one of the founding signatures, right, this would blow everybody's mind, I've known about this for years, was David Cameron. Just take away that thing there, and you'll see down at the bottom, if we just clear away the red stuff, founding signatories included David Cameron, later Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And so, no wonder they didn't do anything. No wonder people like Cameron and so on did nothing during that period. I mean,
well, he saw himself as the heir to Blair.
Yeah.
And Tony Blair actually turned around and said that. He actually said that he saw David Cameron as his successor. The only differentiation between what I call the Uni Party is really if they're going to spend a bit more or a little bit less on tax. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much the difference. Nothing substantive change on migration, nothing substantive on actually slimming down the states. It's all big tax, big spend. And this is why Reform UK and maybe Advance UK in a year or two are going to be gaining traction. They're going to be getting a lot of traction. Now, back on Restore Britain, I don't know if you realise this or not, but earlier this week they put out a petition.
Who's this, sorry?
Restore Britain.
Oh, Restore Britain, yeah.
They put out a petition that's already got over 300,000 signatures, which means it'll be debated in the Houses of Parliament. And it's for mass deportations and offshore detention centres for new arrivals. Now, the fact that 300,000 people have signed it and they only put the petition up 2 days ago, this is the power of Restore Britain as an NGO, potentially. What they're doing is, like my old MP, Mike Amesbury, I used to bring issues of migration to him all the time on emails and letters. Never got a response. And it was never brought up by my Labour MP in the House of Commons. So he was never making present the legitimate concerns of his constituents. It was very much a diversity is a strength, toe the party line. But when you've got a MP like Rupert Lowe, who can put out a petition and get 300k signatures within 2 days, and he's going to bring it to the Commons and say, right, we're going to have mass deportations, or this is what the people want, and we want offshore processing and detention centres.
Yeah.
It's never happened before.
Yes, it's never happened before.
Because from the Uniparty's point of view, from Labour and the Tories' point of view, the concerns of migration or the demographic change of these islands is not something they concern themselves with. That's a far-right concern. And because of organisations like Hope Not Hate or Hate Not Hope, however you want to phrase it, that's why they do what they do. They're very much there to reinforce the centrist regime, the liberal consensus, the post-war consensus. That's exactly their job. That's exactly why anybody, like at this march on the weekend, the United Kingdom, is very lazy and is very convenient for the legacy media to label anybody on that march as a far-right bigot. It's very easy and convenient. But they're doing exactly what we're told we should never do, which is tarring everybody with the same brush.
Yes.
Well, all migrants are criminals, all migrants won't integrate, all migrants are a threat to our women and children. We're always told don't do that because that would be racist, that would be xenophobic, that would be inappropriate. But as soon as they excuse the opposite way to the native white man of Britain, they've got no problem putting out all the eggs in the one basket and saying, right, we're just going to define them in the simplest terms and the easiest definitions. Hand me down morality. If you don't agree with us, there's nothing down for you.
Good point. It's
the two-tier hypocrisy of Keir Starmer's Britain.
Two-tier hypocrisy of Keir Starmer's Britain. I like that. That should be a subtitle for a book. Actually, maybe you could write that one. I'll talk to you in a moment about the march because I believe you were on it. But just to circle back to what's happening with the Hope Not Hate people now. Is this guy a Tory? He wrote this letter. Let's just clear up the screen here. And he wrote it to the Chief Executive of the Charity Commission, Jack Rankin MP, Member of Parliament for Windsor. I presume he's a Tory for Windsor.
So, yeah, Windsor Castle, obviously, it's heart of the British royalty. It's probably one of the safest Tory seats in the entire kingdom.
Right. And so he is questioning the charity status of this group. And he points out that if you're a charity, you should not exist for a political purpose, that political activity must not be the continuing and sole activity of the charity, that the funds must only be spent on delivery of the charity's purposes, that its resources must not fund or support non-charitable purposes. That's a big one. That an organization with a political purpose, such as promoting a change in the law, legally cannot be a charity, and that a charity must guard against the possible leakage of its charitable funds, meaning that the money is contributed to a coalition or alliance must not be spent for purposes other than those of the charity. And he's referring here to the large amount of money that that they've been getting there in the second paragraph. In 2023, this charitable trust, which is to say the one associated with Hope Not Hate, granted 650,000 to something called Hope Not Hate Limited, almost all of its expenditure for that year. 650,000. What you and I, Damien, could do with £650,000, we could literally change not just Britain, but the world. I mean, we could do that, no question about it. But these guys, they just literally, the proverbial up the wall with that money on salaries and no doubt posters as well.
Well, not just that. The march that I was at on the weekend, I actually looked on Hope Not Hate's website, and they actually had a crowdfunder or a GoFundMe.
Oh, yeah.
For the counter protest. And I don't know if it's because it's done through a crowdfunder and not necessarily the larger donations from the British state to the organisation, whether that would fall into the disrepute of the charity, because they're actually crowdfunding from the public a partisan position. If you take the view that the United Kingdom rally was a political rally. By the way, with that political rally on the weekend, there was a very, very welcome Christian overtone to the whole thing. They had clerics there, they had preachers, and there was a gospel choir near the end, and they were singing Jerusalem.
Okay.
Which is all very, very welcome. There was a theme of the Islamification of Britain that nobody voted for. And it's welcome that I mean, to me, these are legitimate concerns. To me, these are legitimate concerns that we should have. And to me, if you're changing the religion of the country, whether that's I think it's Presbyterian you've got in Scotland or C of E down in England, if that changes over a century, shall we say, nobody ever voted for that.
Oh, yeah, no, that's true. Nobody voted for it, and the media are only now going to, and the other parties are only now picking up on it because there's a genuine democratic threat to their order. Just to go back to this letter here, it says, second last paragraph, between 2019 and 2020, the trust received 141,000 in direct government grants, on top of 150,000 from the Home Office Counter-Extremism Unit. This is supplemented by funding from other trusts and funds that themselves receive considerable government funding. In this context, abuse of the charity system, as described above, becomes a direct affront on the taxpayer and raises questions around potential misuse of public funds. But that's £150,000 from the Home Office. Okay, and what do they do with it? They publish a brochure, and I'm in it.
That's probably due to the Muslim network of the Home Office, which is 700 individuals that are in the Home Office and they're deeply embedded in there. And now they've got a Muslim Home Secretary in Shabina Mahmood. I'm sure they're going to get on like a house on fire. Now, what I find concerning is that we know that 90% of the MI5 watch list are Muslim extremists, Islamists. So if we've got NGOs like Hope Not Hate or Hate Not Hope getting that funding from the British state to tackle people like me or you, then all things being equal, there should be one that's targeting the Islamist extremists. And if you're going to do it per capita or proportionately, they should be getting, 9-10 times the funding that these people get.
I like it. I like the maths.
It's
Definitely.
about the proportionality of the concern. Just to
and fairness.
Just to reiterate as well, there's 4 million Muslims in the United Kingdom. Many may be peaceful, but the peaceful majority is usually irrelevant. If you look at mid-century Germany during World War II, yes, you had the mid-century Germans like the Austrian painter that were running Germany, but the peaceful majority of Germans, they were irrelevant to what the regime was going to do. So it's the same here. Now, if you think of the numbers, if you've got 90% of the MI5 watch list is Muslim demographic, that's 1 in 100 of the 4 million Muslims in the country. So as of every 100 Muslims you meet, one of them will be on the terror watch list. It's not the same for the far right gammons like me and you. You're not going to. Proportionately, it's much less of a concern, especially if their biggest concern is people like me or you venting our spleen on our YouTube channels. If that's their biggest concern.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, and the foreigners, they all think alike, you know, and they're not all dangerous, but they all will side with each other at the end of the day. It's not like this idea that there's that they're all going to become like totally integrated and just become like some sort of secular type of normal, just like a kind of bland Britain or something. No. They all have a tribe, shall we say, and they stick to it in a way that people like you and I don't really ever think about. But these guys, and because I know some of them, you know, and I speak to them, you know, and they think in ways that your average Joe would be shocked by.
Well, not just that. I find it's very the way I phrase it is like most other religions. Like if you look at Christianity as a whole, have got more liberal as time goes across.
Yeah.
Meaning the Church of England was very much against divorce, which is why Edward VIII had to abdicate back in the 1930s. Now it's much more acceptable. Now, and other things like if you look at the habits that nuns wear and whatnot, you can get many nuns now and they don't even wear their traditional habits. But if you look at the reverse in the Islamic faith, it's getting more extreme. Because it used to be, I don't know if you knew this or not, but halal slaughter was never specifically needed to perform by a Muslim. It could be any man of the cloth. It could be a Christian. It could be a Jew. It could be any basically cleric of the cloth could do the halal slaughter. But now it has to be a Muslim. So it's getting more liberal and more extreme rather than what you see with other religions like Christianity, where it gets more liberal over time.
Yeah.
And if you want an example of a Christian country that went into Islamic territory, look at Lebanon. It was once Christian, now it's Muslim. It was once the Paris of the region, and now not so much.
Yeah.
And that's because as soon as the particular population gets to a majority or majoritarian in the country, it automatically flips the faith of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't even need to be a majority of a country, just needs to be a majority of a town. Then you've got your new town council or your new city council or whatever, and they're going to just work their will, as is perfectly understandable and normal from their perspective, you know.
But not just that, because we're allowing it to happen.
Realize that.
And if you look at the major urban centres, specifically in England, like Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, London, for example, they are now all minority white British. Nobody ever voted for this. Nobody ever wanted this. And if you look at the reason why the Labour MPs are pandering so much to the Muslim voters, if you look at all the big hitters, like Wyvett Cooper, if you look at West Streeting, if you look at Jess Phillips, they're all going to lose their seats either to Reform UK or to the Islamic Independent Bloc vote. Or Jeremy Corbyn's new party with Zara Sultana, which I affectionately call Jezbollah.
They're all worried about losing the vote.
So that's why you see them pandering so much to that element. However, it's not going to do them any good because they will look at West Streeting and they'll go, right, he's white, he's gay. You don't represent my values. I'm going to vote for somebody who does.
Yes, and maybe they'll vote for reform in a different universe. Well, I think we'll just have to wind up now. We're coming to the top of the hour, but Damien, you do fantastic work over at youtube.com/at CheshireCatMusings, all one word. You're putting out a lot of content on there, a lot of the sensible stuff that you've heard from Damien tonight, putting out something every few days. You've got at least 13,000 people on your YouTube channel, which is a very good accomplishment. Well done for that.
Thank you.
That speaks to your the sincerity and the commitment that you've got for what you've got to say, which is ample and very good. So folks, please do make sure that you are subscribing to youtube.com/@CheshireCatMusings. And Damien, I think we agreed that we'll keep this a monthly effort. So
before we drop off, I wanted to bring up your former First Mistress, Nicola Sturgeon.
Oh yeah.
The raising of the colours that's gone all over Britain now, because it's spread into Wales, it's spread into Scotland. Apparently the nationalists aren't very much for the flag anymore. Apparently they're shocked by people reappropriating their own national flag, and they don't like it because it's not being used in the way that they want. I mean, I just want your quick thoughts on that before we finish. If that's all right.
Well, just very briefly, I think it's quite amusing and it's quite funny that she is able to discern the nature of the flag, and she's able to see a flag flying on a lamppost and know whether that's a good saltire that represents her values or whether it's a saltire that doesn't represent her values and represents the values of somebody else.
If it's not got the yes sign in the middle, then it's a bad one. It's a bad one.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. But you know what? It is catching on up here. Somebody sent a photograph just this afternoon to us on a phone of a street in central Scotland of Saltire and Union Jacks on alternative lampposts down both sides of the street. That's just come up like in the last 24 hours on that particular street. So it's definitely happening. And it's good because in a way it's reclaiming for many other people the saltire that for many years was wrongly associated only with the Scottish nationalists, and patriotic Scots sometimes felt awkward about flying it if they were going to be mistaken for a separatist. But now I think that is falling away. That fear is falling away, and now it's becoming much more a flag of all the people, and its political associations thereby are becoming less, and it's more just being patriotically for Scotland. So I think it's a good thing, and I welcome it, definitely. But we'll say goodnight on that thought to you, and we'll have you back in again next month. Folks, say goodbye to our man, Damien. Good night.
Thank you very much for your time. All the best, and thank you. Have a good day.
Cheers. Excellent stuff from our man Damien. Now, last week we had Ash on, and Ash did a wee video, which we'll just play actually, promoting our book. One Big Country. Let's just play that video just now. Let me find the video.
Hi all, so I just wanted to make a quick video on this. I have read the book now, and this is Protect Our Country. Part 2. This is from Alistair McConnachie and the team at A Force for Good. Alistair, as many of you know, has a degree in law, a degree in Scottish law, I think, and what he has is a unique ability of explaining things to people like me who don't really understand the legal system that well, and making it really easy to understand. A Force for Good is probably the premier organisation for trying to defend Britain, defend its culture, and most importantly in my eyes, keep the UK together as, yes, 4 different countries with different ways of doing things, but also one united kingdom. And this book, 315 pages for a very moderate price, goes through on strategies how to reduce legal immigration, which is a massive problem, actually a bigger problem than illegal immigration to this country at the moment. It details the first duty of government and what government should be doing, and of course what it isn't doing. How to stop the boats, what phrases like indefinite leave to remain actually mean and how they affect us. How to protect our democracy And unlike many others, rather than just moaning about the problems, there's also chapters in there on strategies on how to do this, how to actually win, and how to restore our country to the greatness that it once had. 315 pages for $12.99 I'd think is a pretty good deal. If you want the Kindle version, the ebook, it's just $7.99. As I said, I've read it myself. I think it's really worth a read, really informative and simple to understand, even for someone like me. I've worked with Force for Good for a long time now, and there's also a chapter in there on a Force for Good if you wanted to find out more about them, even attend events that they organise in Scotland. Simply go to Amazon, type in Protect Our Country, and the book is the first thing that comes up. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you have a good read of it. Thank you for watching.
Fantastic. Well, thank you to Ash for that great wee review of the book. And as I said earlier in the show, in the last 2 days, we've sold 13 copies, which is unusual for such a short period of time. We're usually checking in about 1 copy a day of Protect Our Country, a big book for the Union, which basically takes you through what the immigration debate is all about. And every chapter is the solution to the particular problem, whether that's legal immigration, whether it's illegal immigration, whether it's issues around deportation, whether it's issues around indefinite leave to remain, whether it's issues around citizenship, or very importantly, whether it's issues around who gets to vote. Because remember, you don't have to be a British citizen in the UK to vote. Huge numbers of people from all sorts of foreign countries get the vote at all sorts of levels. And they shouldn't get the vote because they will change the vote. They will use the vote to change the country in accord with their own views, which are not necessarily the views of the British people who have been here for centuries. So please do search Amazon for Protect Our Country. It's a great read, and all these think tanks that are trying to think up ideas, they don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's all been down here. It's all been written down here in a very coherent, concise, comprehensive manner. All the answers are in here. And if you don't want to read it, as I always say, just buy a copy anyway and send a copy to your local MP or MSP with the suggestion that they look at it or give it to their team to see if they can get any ideas from it that can help us all. It's all very fair, it's all very humane, and it's all very practical. There's no ridiculous thinking in this. It's all practical stuff that can be done under the system as we know it at the moment. Check it out. Thank you. Now, folks, we are not going to be back next week. We've got to take a break. We've got to catch up on a lot of stuff around the office here. One of the things that we're going to engage in next week is a practical project to send this book to several key people that we have not yet got it into the hands of. We'll be doing that next week, and we'll be back the week after, though. Kenny says, thanks, Damien, as does Catherine. Great show, and another great guest. Folks, it just remains for me to say thank you for watching. We'll be back in a fortnight. God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the King. See you next time.